So your bad photos are actually better than your good photos. And I'm going to tell you why. So how many times have you taken your phone or your digital camera or your film camera and you've gone out with friends or you've gone on a trip and then you set up your tripod, you've taken a great landscape, you're taking great photos of this or that, you go back home, you look at them and you're just like, meh, or you look at them and they're great, but then they end up buried on your hard drive or in your phone photo library and you never look at them again. And they can be great photos, but it happens all the time. So we become conditioned to expect these perfect results from our images, that there's no longer anything really intrinsically interesting or unique about them. I mean, the sky is always perfectly lit. Your phone now makes sure that there's absolutely no blemishes on your skin. There's no blown out highlights or crushed shadows. Everything is just too perfect. And it's because of that people have started to reverse course. You see people using vintage lenses for photography and videography to get that softer look or that different bokeh to their shots. You have people using filters, whether it be black pro mist filters or haze filters or different colored filters, prisms, any of that kind of stuff to create some kind of unique look that isn't perfectly sharp. You have people using grain or lens flares or burnt film effects on their photos to kind of create some vintage type look. I know a guy who actually sells film pre-rolled with light leaks. So your film automatically has that light leak burnt into each individual shot. And it sells out quickly. I mean, you have the TikTok trend that just went viral of a girl cracking her 50mm lens to get that softer, distorted, non-perfect look to her photos. So this is why, looking back at some of my photos, I've come to the conclusion that your bad photos are actually better than your good photos. So now this is going to apply mainly to film photography. Obviously with digital, if you have something out of focus or it's a bad composition or your lighting is off, you look at it and you just look up, take a new picture, you're done and you move on with it. With film, you don't have that luxury. You don't know anything about what your image is going to look like besides what you kind of come up with in your head until you get that film developed. So if it's overexposed, if it's out of focus, if your shadows are completely gone and crushed, you won't see any of that until it's done, and then that is the picture. You don't get a second chance. You don't get another option. That's kind of what you're stuck with. So you don't know what those imperfections or issues are gonna look like until it's too late. Let's look at some examples and kind of explain to you what I'm talking about here. So this photo is actually of my wife in Colorado. We went up to Great Sand Dunes National Park, and this is the photo that I took. And as you can see, there is an object cut right through the middle of that photo. So what happened was, this is on my Canon AE1 program, and I took a lot of photos that day that were actually pretty good, and I really liked. But this is always the first one I think about and first one that comes to my mind when I think of this trip. So between the mirror and the shutter, there's everything in there to kind of keep light out of that mirror box. And so somehow, whether traveling there or hiking or something, this little piece of metal decided to just dislodge and hang right between those two objects. So there's no way I would have seen it unless I was dry firing to check shutter speeds or something like that. And so it was in every single photo. And this one, it kind of cut the image right in half and left half of her face visible. And then of course you see her hand with one of her favorite rings, but it leaves something to mystery. It leaves you wondering and kind of thinking of what the rest of that image looks like, which is why it's so unique, which is why it's so special and leaves a lasting impression. It makes this image more unique and better than my good photos because it has that impression. This tiny little piece of metal that I still have to this day to remind me to inspect my cameras more carefully and always check things. This could have fallen and come loose in transit on our trip up there. It could have been there before, but there's really no way I was gonna notice it out of nowhere, especially with a camera that previously worked fine. This was natural. This happened just by chance. This isn't something I planned out. This isn't something I filter I grabbed off the internet and put on there. This is all just how things worked out in that moment, which to me, and I think to most people, makes it a more powerful image. And I'll show you several examples of where it didn't work out and it did work out. Sometimes it looks great in camera, other times it can ruin an image. Light leaks can line up perfectly to kind of highlight a subject or give you a really cool effect, or they can completely distort an image and kind of make it useless. I actually just developed film for a friend of mine who had a Fed camera he took on a trip, and I believe, from what I can tell, he had pinholes in the cloth shutter, just from natural wear and tear and degrading over time. But because of those pinholes, he got this very interesting effect. It looked almost like Christmas lights, and it gave this very hazy, mystical-esque type of look down a lot of his images. And I think it really added a great look and a great feel and a warmth to those images almost, making them more natural, more enjoyable because of how that looked. And that's something you're not going to be able to generate or something you're going to be able to predict until that film is developed and you see the end results. Now, of course, I don't recommend this for any professional work you're doing. I mean, this might be great to you, but having this kind of happen in a wedding or in a brand's photos, they're probably not going to remember it in the same way and liking that you might. So this isn't going to be the case for all situations. But having these unpredictable errors that occur in film photography that take a good photo and make it bad is actually what takes that photo from being bad and making it better than your good photos.